The Raiders got their man. Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty is set to bring his thrilling talent and striking likability to Las Vegas. But what type of impact will he have on the franchise? How did Pete Carroll, John Spytek, and company do over draft weekend? And will the Raiders be kicking themselves for passing on Shedeur Sanders? All that and so much more coming up right now on City Beat.
From Las Vegas, this is City Beat.
Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us here on City Beat. I'm Mike Davis. Thanks for hanging out with us. City Beat is the show that dissects the Vegas sports world through the eyes of the sports reporters and storytellers leading the charge. Joining the action today on the panel, we got Steve Cofield, host of Cofield and Company on ESPN Las Vegas, Ray Brewer, managing editor of the Las Vegas Sun, and our very own Kevin Bollinger, sports director here at Fox 5 Las Vegas. So today we're breaking down everything from the NFL draft. So let's start with the Raiders selecting Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State with the 6th overall pick. Kevin, was Jeanty the right pick at 6?
You know, 1 week ago we said we didn't think he was going to be there, but the Raiders, when you look at what they did with the rest of their draft, you know, and what they want to do with their offense, the fact that he was there at 6, I think that he was the right pick, considering that Pete Carroll wants to run the football and have that as his base. Now, both Steve and I talked about the fact that they needed some offensive line help, and they did get that a little bit later on to try and shore things up, and it looks like the Colton Miller situation maybe is easing itself off. So I think that it was the right pick for the setup that the Raiders had.
Value-wise, a lot of people, Steve, hate going running back in the first round altogether. Is it too rich for you at number 6 in the top 10?
It's a terrible value pick, but it can still be a good pick if he produces. If he does the 1,300 yards we talked about last week every season from scrimmage, then it's a good pick. It's a good pick because Pete Carroll wanted him. I might argue 5 years from now, if Ashton Jeanty is not with the Raiders, or they don't want to give him that 5th year or reward him with the 5th year option, that Armand Membu and Travion Henderson at the first pick and second pick would have been a better combination. But if he goes out and he produces at a high level, they're winning games, maybe as important, he's a megastar in Las Vegas, a megastar in the NFL. He's making Mark Davis money. He's keeping Pete Carroll around until he's 77 years old. Those are all good things.
I love it. I was talking with you, Steve, on Cofield and Company at ESPN Las Vegas. I was saying, you know, it just seems like this is a guy, Ray, who both on and off the field is the culture builder, the type of guy we continually keep hearing that Spytek and Carroll want to bring into the building. Ashton Jeanty fits the bill.
Is it wrong of me to say what I love about him is what I hate about him? I love the fact that he wants the ball and he is willing to carry a team to the finish line. And that mentality is, to me, just invaluable. But I also hate how he had like 660 touches or whatever, which was a record. Yeah, he broke 88 tackles, also a record. But you worry about the wear and tear. And then to go to Steve's point, was there much of a drop from him to like Henderson from Ohio State that they got in the 2nd round? And, you know, the Raiders addressed a need. They got a running back. They were the worst running back team in the league last year. But they were behind a lot throwing the ball. Are they going to have an opportunity to where they could actually use him, or are they going to have to rely on Geno, gosh forbid, not a big fan, obviously, to throw the rock around all season?
By the way, good point. Probably the second person who's made the point on wear and tear coming into the league.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen with Nick Saban running backs. Their first year sometimes, and I'm not saying he's a Nick Saban running back, but a guy who gets run into the ground with hundreds and hundreds of carries, that first year is almost a recovery year. I don't expect that to happen. But Boise did use him a lot. I mean, they needed him to make their money, get to the playoff. He ran the ball a lot. And you can look at Bijan Robinson. Year 1, everyone's like, wait, what happened here? He's not as explosive. The production's not as good. Since then, he's been really good.
I would like to see, you know, maybe another guy in the mix with him, maybe more running back by committee. But, Kevin, does those wear and tear concerns concern you at all?
You know, he seems to be built differently. And if you look at maybe he didn't have as many of the impact in terms of hits. Maybe he didn't absorb as many hits at Boise as some of the others out of college, which maybe is a little bit better situation. He said the main thing that he needs to do as he gets to the NFL is pass protection. He knows that that's his one weakness, and the Raiders are going to have to use him in that situation as well. I want to see how he does in terms of picking up guys that are coming in on him, to bail out the offensive line if there's a blitz or something.
I just think maximize that rookie deal. I mean, and he's such an exciting talent. It just seems like he's going to be a perfect fit for what we're trying to build here. But listen, when it comes to the NFL draft, everybody was talking about one thing. It's the slide, right? The slide of Shedeur Sanders, Colorado quarterback, only a few months ago considered a top 10 draft pick during draft weekend. He ends up getting passed on again, and again, sliding all the way to the 5th round as the 144th pick of the draft. Why did he fall, and should the Raiders have taken a chance on him? The panel shares their thoughts after this.
You're watching Sin City Beat.
The Shedeur Sanders slide, it's the talk of the town. It's the story that has endlessly captivated NFL fans and media members. How does a talent playing the most important position in all of sports, originally projected as a top 10 draft pick, wind up a 5th round selection? Is it a question of talent? Is it a question of off-the-field distractions? Or is it something deeper? Steve Cofield, why did Shedeur Sanders fall all the way to the 5th round?
He fell because of himself and because of his father. They overplayed their value and their leverage. Generally there's one quarterback like every 8 years who has the leverage of, say, a Manning or an Elway or an Andrew Luck, or I just said a Manning, a Peyton Manning. He didn't. Right. He's not a surefire prospect. He's got flaws. Then when you bring along all the social media stuff, the labeling himself legendary. And the other thing he fell victim to is there weren't a lot of people who were looking in the 1st round for that franchise quarterback. And as it turns out now, Pittsburgh absolutely was not. Clearly they weren't impressed when they met up with him. I still believe that Aaron Rodgers thing is just about done. So they knew they had that in the back pocket. So bad circumstances for him, overplayed his hand.
It's puzzling to me because a quarterback can change the trajectory of a franchise. We saw what Jaden Daniels did last year. So for a guy who has promise, who's clearly better than guys like Dylan Gabriel who went ahead of him, what could have really occurred here? Do you think it was just so much of the one-on-one interactions, the interviews, those things that are now leaking out?
I think that it really snowballed quickly, and he may turn out to be a great pro quarterback. However, the headache that could come with that is nothing that a franchise, especially a franchise like the Raiders, that might not have a winning season, could afford to take on. And I think when you measure the positives and the negatives, yeah, he would have to develop. And yes, the Raiders could potentially develop him. But do you want to have the constant noise in the background of when is he going to play, or is he going to develop, or then his dad all of a sudden going off, and now it's just constant attention to what could be your backup quarterback.
It's a lot of distraction. So taking that into consideration, Kevin, were you perplexed or surprised that the Raiders, with all these draft picks, I think producer James told me they passed on him 6 separate times, the Raiders. Did you think at a certain point, 4th, 5th round, this would be a guy that is worth the risk to take?
No, because once the Raiders got Geno Smith, they didn't need to pick somebody up for a short term. We're talking the next 2 or 3 years, except for maybe another backup quarterback to go along with Aiden O'Connell. They weren't looking for that. In terms of when you get into the 4th and 5th rounds, they still had a lot of holes to fill. And they can say that they didn't want to draft for a need or not. If you look at their draft board, they drafted for spots that they needed to fill. That was not one of them. On the priority board, quarterback was not up there. And so it's not a surprise to me at all that they passed on it.
By the way, not only did they pass on him multiple times, the cornerback they took really didn't play a whole lot. He wasn't a full-time starter at Iowa State. He was a special teamer, but he's projectable. The wide receiver they took is another projectable guy at 6'5" and 205 and runs a 4.3. Like, they were taking projects ahead of him at other positions.
Right.
But if he was a guy who was quiet and who didn't have that social media baggage, if you will, and the questions of his dad coming in, would they have taken a shot on him?
I'll be interested to see, and this won't happen until several years down the road when some of these current NFL executives will give us a feel for what the thought process was in the war and put their name on it, not put an anonymous source to somebody to do it. Somewhere down the road, there will be a 30 for 30 or an unfiltered on this whole thing, and I think that people would feel more comfortable down the road and saying, this is what we saw, this is why we passed. But until then, it's all just a matter of people making assumptions.
I will say, Todd McShay did put out that the Giants gave Shador a package to take a look at, playbook, and like when he came back, they threw him up on the whiteboard. He clearly did none of it. That's just an absolute fail. You're not good enough to not come back. It's a job interview. Have any of us gotten a job interview and we're like, I'm Kevin Bones. You know who I am? We kind of do, but we also would like to get to know you a little more. There were also reports that came out today that, I don't know, he's taking like FaceTime calls during interviews, during discussions. Pay attention.
It was a lot like, Step Brothers. He was like Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly on a job interview for probably a lot of these interviews. The problem is, though, it's puzzling and fascinating to me that because he's not really a backup quarterback and more of the starting quarterback archetype, it actually hurt him in the long run, because I guess if there's no belief that he could be a starter, then, we don't want him as a backup.
Is Quinn Ewers the archetype backup? Is Will Howard a backup?
But I guess people think,
These
from
are the best quarterbacks in college football, Mike, and they all slid down.
Yeah. No, it's true. A lot of these guys slid, so it's fascinating. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this guy, and we'll see, like Kevin said, whether a lot of these franchises, a lot of teams passed on him, and now the Browns did a very Browns-esque type of thing, is my philosophy. And we spoke about that the other day, Steve and I. But yes, the Raiders came away from this draft with 11 players. Which draftees have the chance to make the biggest impact on the new guys heading to Vegas after these words? Sports media is raving about the Raiders draft haul. Now here, Sin City Beat producer James, he's not a big fan of draft grades, but just to give you a sense of the national reception of the Raiders draft class, here's a little taste. So NFL.com gave the Raiders an A grade, Bleacher Report A+ grade, Pro Football Focus A grade, and Fox Sports A grade. So Ray Brewer, beyond Jeanty, what did you think about the Raiders and the other selections? We're going to do a deep dive on that. But if you want to give us a grade, feel free to do that. But did you share the same sentiment as national draft media and NFL media did?
It was like my report card at Chaparral High School, all A's coming through. I think it's encouraging that people who are smarter than us, or at least smarter than me, think the Raiders did good in their draft. I'm kind of on James's side, where why don't we grade it in 2 years when the dust has settled a little bit and we get to see, if injuries happen or, if somebody fits into a system. The NFL, there's constant coaching change, and the new coach might not align with whomever there. But the Raiders draft, what I love about it is, like we talked about earlier, they needed a running back. Bam, they got a running back. They needed a wide receiver. They got a very, very dependable wide receiver from TCU who could catch the ball. Steve said, defensive back. Guy only had 3 picks in 6 years, played a lot of special teams, super, super quick. Let's see if it matriculates into
So
something.
Steve was saying there's a lot of projects, you were saying, in your estimation from this, and you were kind of, making a parallel comparison there with Shador, and if that were to be a project. But let's just say, let's focus on the 11 guys we got, the projects. What did you feel about the overall draft class, and are you not feeling it because of the project nature of it?
I don't mind them taking the defense back at Iowa State. They think he's going to be like Richard Sherman. The wide receiver is an Al Davis type pick. They even joked about that. 6'5" and runs a 4.3. I love what they did with the offensive line. Listen, Pete Carroll, if you look at his history, they make a lot of moves. They have guys coming in and out. They want competition. So they got 2 offensive linemen who are veterans. One is a true tackle. The other's a guard. Okay, throw them in the mix, right, with DJ Glaze and all these guards, and let's see who wins. And by the way, whoever wins at the start of the season doesn't mean they're going to win at the end or the middle.
Yeah.
So you're going to have constant competition. So I like adding more young guys to that room. And the quarterbacks are kind of interesting. Jack Besh, I think, is a home run pick. He's explosive. He's a big guy at 6'1" and 215. Obviously, a good character guy. And he goes right in there as a guy who can play in the slot but also play outside. So they needed more talent and bigger talent at wide receiver.
Okay, now let's talk about Besh for a little bit. I know this is a guy, he got a lot of attention, unfortunately, heartfelt story with his brother Tiger, Princeton wide receiver, in the tragic event from New Orleans. But, Kevin, let's talk about this guy as a talent from TCU. You were saying, there was a big connection there from LSU and Pete Carroll. Give us a little bit more insight on that.
Yeah, before Besh went to TCU, he played at LSU for Ed Orgeron. And Ed Orgeron is a Pete Carroll guy in terms of their time at USC. And when Orgeron left LSU, that is when Besh made the transfer to TCU. But Carroll talked about the fact that Orgeron spoke very highly of him. There was that connection. And Pete Carroll and Ed Orgeron, when you have somebody on your staff that you trust, and he talks about this person, not only the player, but the character of the person, there's a certain comfort level that makes the Raiders know that they made the right choice there with Besh. And what he can do on the field.
And you take a look at him, you see his highlights. He's definitely yoked out a little bit. This is not, the Hunter Renfrow white wide receiver feel here. There's even more of a Cooper Kupp kind of vibe to this guy. So we'll see what happens there. But it seems like, once again, a stud on and off the field, and a very touching moment with Spytek and Pete Carroll when they made that draft call, alluding to Tiger and all that stuff. But let's talk about Charles Grant. So, Steve, you like this guy from William & Mary. I know producer James Mike Tomlin is a former William & Mary guy as well. But what do you like about Charles Grant?
I think most of it's about the competition. I don't know if DJ Glaze is the long-term right tackle answer. By the way, I know things have calmed down a little bit with Colton Miller at left tackle, but they need to bring in more tackles in case they got to make a move on Colton Miller. If he's not signed long-term, or he has another year where he's beat up. He's only 29, but he was beat up last year, had a substandard year for his standard. So more bodies in, and I would expect them to, if it's not amongst the UDFAs, with other tryouts, to bring in more tackles. That's a position they've got to solve. I mean, they haven't had the right tackle for a long time here. And it's been a long string now with Raider regimes, over 3 of them, where they've tried to go kind of bargain basement. I think they've got the 28th highest paid offensive line. So if you're going to do that, you got to hit on draft picks and you got to hit on UDFAs, especially at the tackle position.
Okay. And remember, the guards now in the NFL are the size of tackles. So they're a little more, it used to be interchangeable with guard and center. Yeah. Now it's a little bit more tackles moving into guards. They know they have the center position taken care of with Jackson Powers Johnson. So to have interchangeable guys at those other 2 positions, guard and tackle on the outside, is massive. And trading down, don't underestimate John Spytek, trading down to get those 2 extra picks, that gave them the 2 extra guys.
By the way, if this means anything, reading Niners reporters, the Niners were on Grant, and they were ready to draft him, and because the Raiders had 2 picks and kind of surprised everyone by going back-to-back with offensive linemen to really screw over the Niners.
Wow. Okay. All right. Good stuff there. Well, after the break, we're putting the panel on the spot. It's prediction time for the panel. Post-draft, what's the outlook look like for the upcoming season? How many games will the Silver and Black secure? Don't go anywhere. All right. Welcome back to Sin City Beat. Well, it's prediction time for the panel. After seeing the draft unfold, seeing the players Spytek and Carroll have drafted, I want to know how many games you guys think the Raiders will win this upcoming season. So, Kevin, let's start with you. I mean, just from an outlook standpoint, I know you don't always love to give predictions, but, are you feeling a lot better knowing the AFC West, knowing the fact you got Reed, you got Harbaugh, you got Peyton in there. Now, Carroll, did he recharge and bring a lot of juice to this team that's going to definitely need it?
Well, 2 things. First off, they were 0-6 against the AFC West last year. So if they're going to make any type of run towards, that 8, 9, 9, and 8, and in position to make a run at a wild card, they're going to have to win 3 or 4 games probably within the division. But with what they've done in terms of getting the running game potentially to shorten some games, I think they're going to be in a lot more 1-score games this year. So it's a matter of, can they get over the hump and win that? If they do, they are going to be in the conversation, I think, for a wild card. But if they can't win those 1-score games, then, I think the number that the books had it at is maybe 6.5, 5.5 right now. That'll be interesting to see where that plays out.
Okay, where are you guys on this? 5.5, 6.5? What's the number you're settling on?
I'll go first,
Well,
Steve.
the win total 6.5. So if you want to base it on that.
Well, I have them going 7 and 10. Let's be honest. They've improved in the coach's box, in the general manager's box, and at quarterback. They addressed needs at running back, at wide receiver. They're still bad on the offensive line. They're going to get healthy at other spots. They're better now than they were 3 or 4 months ago at the end of the season. But at the same time, they're one bad injury away, and they still have to play Mahomes and Reed, Herbert and Harbaugh, and
Nix and Payton.
I would say Payton in that great defense. And so you're right, 6-0. If you do have to win 3 games to get in the position for a wild card conversation, I don't know where those 3 are going to come. 7 would be very optimistic. Great number by the sports books.
Okay. What about you?
7 is very optimistic. I guess I'm going to go crazy and say they win 8 games. I think a lot of Raiders fans are like, yeah, they're going to win 9 or 10 games. I think 8-9 is possible. A lot of the stuff that Kevin said, the improvements, the run game is going to shorten games. I do have questions on defense, though. Is Wilkins back or not?
Right.
I mean, that's a $30 million player. They expect something big out of him. And they lost a lot of guys on defense. They replaced that in the draft and with some of their bargain basement, no insult to those guys, signings. We're going to see what they do on defense. And the division is ridiculous. So 0-6 to 2-4, like that would help. But, yeah, I mean, I think going 9 or 10 wins would be – he's not going to win Coach of the Year, but that would be a big effort by Pete Carroll in year 1.
Okay, 7 and 8. I like that 2 stuff. Real quickly, we got about 45 seconds here, Kevin. The big thing left to accomplish for this team, you think it's the linebackers? What part of this team needs to be addressed most for the rest of the offseason?
Yeah, depth and defense, especially linebackers and on the back end. And then, they do have, I think, the second most salary cap space left. So are they going to use that to pick up some other players, or are they going to, say, get the Colton Miller deal done, front load that a little bit to give them a little bit of room somewhere down the road that could help them out?
Okay, all right. I think this is a positive outlook from the panel today. I like it, especially from Ray. You never know what you're going to get from Ray Brewer, so a lot more
7
positivity
wins, very
than
positive.
I thought. Okay, I like it. For Steve, Ray, and Kevin, I'm Mike Davis. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sin City Beat. We'll see you next time.